foundation for entering into the spiritual path. Right view in the beginning doesn't apply to right view of self. That is the end of the path. It is basically concerned with the first two noble truths. When we see clearly that we are fighting a losing battle, so long as we keep trying to have sense pleasures and protect ourselves from losing our ego, then we're on the way. That's the moment of entering the path, and it's a moment of joy. With it, a certainty arises that the way out has been found and that the final result must come. It's just a matter of time. That joyous feeling is essential for meditation, and meditation is essential for treading the path.
Each one of us proves the Buddha's words. We have suffering and we have craving, we have some right view, and we experience karma and its results. We can also change, and we have learned something from the past suffering. We can prove the Buddha's words in many ways if we just pay enough attention. That creates self-confidence, knowing one really can tread the Noble Eightfold Path to its very end. This confidence is necessary as part of the practice. Self-confidence is not a feeling of superiority, but of independence. We have to work independently for our emancipation.
The Buddha said that we shouldn't believe what he says, but should inquire into it and verify it for ourselves. He gave 10 reasons for not following a spiritual path in one of his very famous discourses, the Kalama Discourse. It applies to us today as vividly as it appeared to the Kalama people. It is just as pregnant with meaning for us as it was then. The Kalama people came to see the Buddha when he visited their capital of Kesaputta and said to him, "Sir, we have had many spiritual teachers visit our town, and each one has been able to propound his teaching in an excellent, very believable way. Equally, though, every one of these teachers denied and negated every other teacher. Now we are totally confused. We do not know whom to believe." The Buddha said, "It is proper for you, Kalama, to doubt, to be uncertain." He then propounded the 5 precepts to them and asked whether they would be conducive to happiness if they were kept, and conducive to unhappiness for themselves and others if they were transgressed. The Kalamas agreed that this would be so. Then the Buddha said to them, "Never believe any spiritual teaching because it is repeatedly recited, or because it is written down in the scriptures, or because it has been handed down from teacher to disciple, or because everybody around you believes it, or because it has metaphysical qualities, or because it agrees with what you believe anyway, or because you can rationalize it. Don't believe it if it is a viewpoint that you need to defend, and don't believe it because the teacher is a reputable person or because the teacher said so."
When the Kalama people had heard the Buddha, they became his followers. Here was a guideline for them, which is equally valid today. Don't believe something because it's a tradition, or because everybody around you does it, or because it's written in a book, but only, the Buddha said, if you have inquired into it and found it to be useful and true. There's no question that we can find suffering in ourselves, and the more we look inward, the more dissatisfaction will we find. When we no longer crave to change our personal suffering into personal satisfaction, with the resistance gone, the suffering goes. Acceptance of things as they are constitutes right view.
The Brahmins, the priest caste in India, were not very friendly toward the Buddha because he was undermining their livelihood. He preached that one didn't need an intermediary between oneself and the gods in order to gain happiness, also that it wasn't very useful to pour ghee over stone gods and offer flowers and incense. Since this was the livelihood of the Brahmins, although many of them did eventually become followers of the Buddha, there were others who disliked him thoroughly.
One day one of the Brahmins who objected to the Buddha came to listen to one of the Buddha's discourses and, while he was still speaking, walked up and down in front of him. Then he proceeded to abuse the Buddha, using quite rough language. He said the Buddha was the teacher of a wrong doctrine, that he should be chased out of the country, that he was breaking up family life because the young men were following him into monkhood, that the people should not support him. He reviled him in every possible way he could think of.
When he had finally run out of words, the Buddha, who had been quietly sitting there listening, said, "Brahmin, do you ever have guests in your house?" The Brahmin answered, "Yes, of course we have guests in our house." The Buddha said, "When you have guests in your house, do you offer them hospitality? Do you offer them food and drink?" The Brahmin said, "Well, of course we do. Of course I offer them food and drink." The Buddha continued, "And if they don't accept your hospitality, if they don't take your food and drink, to whom does it belong?" The Brahmin said, "It belongs to me. It belongs to me." The Buddha said, "That's right, Brahman. It belongs to you." This is a good story to remember. Any abuse, anger, or threat belongs to the one who is uttering it. We don't have to accept it.
Right intention. The second step on the Noble Eightfold Path is right intention. Right intention comes from right view. If there is wrong view, obviously the wrong intention will follow. So it is important that we do something about our views. All our views are tainted with our ego delusion. We see things from the standpoint of I'm seeing, and therefore even views that are obviously not wrong in the worldly sense, are wrong in the spiritual, liberating sense. However, we have to start where we are. It's no use waiting until the day deeper understanding arrives. It won't come, anyway, unless we work for it.
Peace and happiness are not our birthright. Those who have gained them have done so through constant effort. This effort is directed towards setting one's views right so that the intention becomes right. Right view and right intention constitute the wisdom aspect of the path. Before the Buddha became enlightened, when he was still a bodhisattva, he watched his mind moments carefully and realized that when he had thoughts of ill will, thoughts of cruelty, or desire, they were to his own detriment. When he had thoughts of renunciation, loving kindness, compassion, and harmlessness, they were to his own benefit. Having trained his mind sufficiently, he was able to let go of thoughts that were unwholesome.
There are three aspects, then, to right intention: renunciation, loving kindness, and harmlessness. Renunciation cannot be accomplished either through wishful thinking or suppression. Neither will work. It has to be accomplished through the right view, that desire is always suffering. If we can actually experience that in ourselves, then naturally we will want to renounce the desire that has arisen. We will do so happily, joyously experiencing the real relief of having let go of suffering and problems. Desire is always suffering because it only arises when there's something missing that we want. Whether it is food or enlightenment doesn't matter. It's something we don't have, so we desire it and experience the lack as painful. Then if we can't get what we desire, of course, there is frustration, resentment, grief, sadness. Obviously we suffer if we can't get what we want.
If we do have a particular desire gratified, that too creates disturbance in us because we know from past experience that the gratification will not last. We worry about how to prolong the pleasure. The worry is suffering, and when it doesn't last, there is suffering again. Trying to make anything last creates tension and fear. We're afraid of losing certain people, situations, belongings, and feelings. There is also the fear of not getting them when we want them, such as arises after a good meditation. Oh, isn't this nice? Finished. I wonder if I could have that again. What am I going to do now? Suffering has arisen, because any desire has this as its feature. Only when we recognize this in ourselves with certainty, will we be able to start renouncing. It's our attachment to things and people that we want to keep that creates suffering for us. Nothing but pain and problems until life's end. Unless we know it, we won't be able to give it up.
Renunciation starts when one gives something away that one knows one is really attached to. If one can do that happily, not with teeth clenched and eyes closed so that one won't see what's going on, but joyously, then one has seen the danger of clinging. More important than giving things away is giving up one's views and opinions about oneself and the world and about how other people should behave and react, especially those one is close to. All this is suffering, being bound up in the desire for having and owning.
There's also the desire for being loved, for instance. Or being a wife and mother, or being famous, or being appreciated. Any desire is suffering and prevents one from feeling contented and peaceful. To be different from how one is another desire that creates suffering. To work and gently transform oneself is different. But desires in the mind are due to feeling a gap, a lack, something missing. That's painful. Only renunciation can assuage that pain. We're always trying to answer that pain by trying to get what we desire. It has never killed the pain, because when desire is not renounced, it constantly reminds us of the pain.
Renunciation underlies right intention. Love and compassion and harmlessness toward other beings and our understanding of the truth of suffering bring our intentions in line. All four noble truths are bound up with each other because they go to the depth of our psyche. When we understand correctly, we can act skillfully. The suffering we have in ourselves is manifested innumerable times in all beings.
If we watch a bird, for instance, instead of thinking what pretty feathers it has and how melodious a song, how it can fly through the air without any difficulty and go anywhere it chooses, take a better look. The bird is constantly looking around, turning its head right and left out of fear that another animal may attack it or its nest. At other times, the mating instinct comes to the fore. Then the desire for survival manifests in its constant search for food. And this is just one living being out of so many.
Look at other people and watch their faces. They don't need to say anything. And of course, watch yourself. The Buddha recommended that we get to know our internal and external world. This is mindfulness, being awake and aware. If we can see suffering in all the living beings that we contact, then we can assume, without any doubt, that it's true for all living beings, wherever they are. Unless our minds become imbued with that, loving kindness and compassion won't flourish. There will always be some objection in the back of the mind. Yes, I could love her if only she wouldn't speak like this or react like that. Or, I would have compassion for her, but she brought it all on herself. None of this matters. Suffering is universally inside all of us, and unless we can see that clearly, loving kindness and compassion are going to be an off and on affair. When things go well, we can manage. When things become difficult, we can't. Right intention means that we are always on the alert to act and react skillfully. It must not depend on whether we are feeling fine or whether the person is behaving in a way we can tolerate, or whether it's gone beyond that limit.
Right intention is our karma-making process because our mental formations are having the intentions. Right view can be established in ourselves through some wisdom and insight. It will be a foundation for our intentions. Intentions are constantly arising with every action and reaction. Karma, O monks, I declare, is intention, are the Buddha's words. This is how we make karma, and if we believe that good karma is essential for our well-being, we have to watch our intentions.
An interesting aspect of intentions is that they are like icebergs, 1/3 out of water, 2/3 underwater. We can only see their tips. We give something and we see the generosity, but have we examined the intention behind that generosity? In order to get to know oneself, one needs to probe into unknown depths. There are many hidden crevices inside oneself. We don't like to look, because we meet the not-so-nice aspects of ourselves. But that's why we are human beings, otherwise we might have wound up in the Deva realm. We might as well acknowledge our failings. Only what we bring out into the light to see, can we clean up. The dirt under the carpet never gets cleaned unless we take the carpet away. The Buddha compared our defilements to wet hay. If it's kept in a closed barn, it will rot. But let the light of day shine on it, it will soon dry out and become useful fodder. Let's look into the hidden crevices and thoroughly examine our intentions. The next 3 steps on the Noble Eightfold Path concern moral conduct, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. The first 2 are concerned with the precepts, divided into speech and action.
Right speech. Speech is very important and needs a little more attention than it usually gets. Just because we know how to speak doesn't mean that we really have the skill of speech. I don't mean we should become orators. That's a different kind of skill. The Buddha said something very interesting about speech that is well worth remembering. If you know anything that's hurtful and untrue, don't say it. If you know anything that's helpful and untrue, don't say it. If you know anything that is hurtful and true, don't say it. If you know anything that is helpful and true, find the right time. This means to desist from impetuous speech. We need to think about it first, to make sure that it will be helpful, that it's also true, and that the right time has come. The right time has come when the other person is agreeable to listening and in a peaceful frame of mind. And it should, above all,
be a time when one has only loving feelings for the other person. Only then should one say anything. If there is any dislike, resistance, or rejection in one's mind about the other person, it's going to show in the speech and it will not be useful or profitable. Everybody has occasions when they want to tell others what they should or shouldn't do. By using the above criteria, one has a good chance of success.
Right speech is traditionally explained as no slander, no gossip, no backbiting, not setting one person against another, not using harsh or abusive speech. The Buddhist said that speech makes and breaks families and friends. It is at the root of harmonious companionship and also its opposite, enmity. The Buddha also said that right speech includes not overrating or understating. This means one does not exaggerate, making either maximum or minimum statements. That too,